This is a prototype version of the 2022 GMC Hummer EV, and it's a new electric pickup truck from General Motors. But that's understating things a little bit because this has some amazing numbers, around 1,000 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's also the revival of the Hummer brand with a sticker price of over $100,000. Today, I'm going to review the Hummer EV prototype and show you everything. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. And we've had some great sales recently on Cars and Bids, including several cars we've sold for more money than the competition. For instance, this 2009 Mercedes CL63 brought $45,500 on Cars and Bids and failed to sell for under $40,000 on a competitor's site. Same deal with this Nissan 350Z, which brought $26,000 on Cars and Bids and failed to sell for under $20,000 with a competitor. If you're looking to sell your cool enthusiast car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. Check it out at carsandbids.com. So let's talk Hummer EV. As you know, the Hummer brand was synonymous with massive gas-guzzling SUVs until it died about 10 years ago. Well, now it's back and it's electric. And like I said, the numbers are insane. This has around 1,000 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Numbers that would have been unthinkable for the gas-powered Hummer SUVs from before. As for pricing, these trucks will go on sale soon by the end of the year, with prices starting around $113,000. But that's for the top of the range Edition 1 model, which is already sold out. More affordable versions will be coming soon, with prices ranging from $80,000 and up. And as for range, General Motors says ballpark around 350 miles of range on a single charge for the longest range version. And today I'm going to review the Hummer EV pickup truck and show you everything else. Now, this isn't a full production model. It's still a prototype version, so not everything is completely finalized, but this video will still give you the best look yet at the quirks and features of the new Hummer EV. I'm also going to drive the Hummer EV, and then I'll give it a DOUGSCORE. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the electric Hummer pickup truck with some Easter eggs. This vehicle has little Easter eggs hidden all throughout it, which I will show you, but two very important ones you notice the moment you open the door. One, on the door sill, you have this little graphic. That is the grille of this vehicle, reprinted here on the door sill with little H's at the end. Those H's are part of the light signature in the front grille, and of course, H is intended to stand for Hummer, and there are little H Easter eggs all throughout this vehicle. Like I said, I'll show you. Another interesting Easter egg here, when you first open the door, on the door sill, the speaker cover is a little weird looking. That is the surface of the moon. And if you look closely, you can see a little moon boot intending to drive that point home further. Why, you might wonder, is the surface of the moon on the speaker cover? Because this truck is GM's moonshot, like an electric pickup truck off-roader luxury thing. And so the moon is also a theme in various Easter eggs throughout this car, again, which I will show you. Just keep those in mind. But anyway, next, let's move inside the electric Hummer and let's talk roof. This doesn't have some normal, boring, fixed roof like most vehicles. Instead, it has 4 individually removable roof panels, one over each seat. And you can see when the panels are in place, they're glass, so you can see out, and they're tinted to limit the sun coming into the interior. But if you want to remove the roof panels, you can do so one by one, and it's pretty easy to do. Just flip this latch in the front of the panel. You can see that unlocks the front, and then flip the same latch in the back of the panel, and the back part is unlocked, and then you can just lift the roof panel right off. And you can do that to all 4 roof panels, front and rear, and then you have an open air driving experience in your Hummer EV. All of these will come with the 4 removable roof panels. There's no fixed roof models right now, so in addition to being an electric pickup truck, there's also a convertible. Now, a couple of interesting things with these roof panels. When you remove them, you can stow them in the vehicle, in the front trunk. Yes, there's a front trunk. We'll get to that in a minute. minute, but each one of these is going to come with bags that you can put each roof panel in, or like some sort of accessory organizer system to make it even easier to get them out and put them back on or take them off. Also worth noting, each one of the roof panels is a different piece. They are not interchangeable, and they're all individually numbered, so you know which one goes where. Also worth mentioning, you can remove this crossbar that goes between the removable roof panels over the front seats. You can see there's a little panel and written on it, Max View Release. If you take a screwdriver and unscrew the little holes next to that, you can undo this little panel. And there are 2 more holes in the back, and then you can remove it and take it off for a full open air experience in the front. Not quite as easy to remove as the removable panels, but you can still get it off if you want a full kind of top-down feel up here. Now, next up, I want to talk interior, and I'm going to start with the dashboard, which is very boxy. You can see a lot of squares, a lot of right angles, a lot of boxes, a lot of rectangles in this dashboard. It is intended to evoke this kind of brawny, muscular, tough feel. There's no swoopy lines in here, not in the Hummer. This thing is tough with all its squares. Now, the big focal point in this dashboard is this center screen, which is very large, and it has several cool quirks. I'm going to start with the drive modes. You can adjust the drive modes with this dial here in the center. You twist it, and then it changes drive modes, and each new drive mode is displayed on this screen in a wonderful fashion. The car sort of breaks through this cyber wall and onto the surface that you've selected, and it's very cool to see each surface have its own little display and video that goes along with it. A couple of interesting things here. One, when you go into off-road modes, it asks you to confirm that you do want to go into them, and the message that pops up isn't just some standard legalese message. It's kind of a clever little quirky message instead, which is sort of a theme of this vehicle. Not the typical General Motors humorless stuff, but a little more interesting and edgy. I also like the fact that when you go into tow mode here, the graphic displayed on the screen is an electric Hummer towing a space shuttle, because of course, again, another moon reference. I mentioned there'd be a lot of those, and there's still more to come. Next up, also interesting in this screen, a lot of different off-roader displays. It'll be important when you're out there on the trails. For instance, you can see a G meter right here and a drift meter that shows your maximum drift angle, so you can compare it to your friends. I was very surprised General Motors got that by their legal team, but they did indeed. You also have other graphics here showing things like motor usage. So when you accelerate, it shows exactly which motors are being used and how much. You also have wheel articulation on here to show you exactly how much suspension travel you're using, and you can see your differential locks here, which you can toggle on or off on this screen. This will also show you your tire pressures, which is of course handy when you're off-roading, and at the end there's even an altimeter that shows your current precise altitude, just in case it becomes relevant when you're off-roading your electric Hummer. Next up, another cool quirk of this screen, the camera system. This vehicle has 18 different cameras on the outside to show you this truck from basically every angle. And there's even a camera under the vehicle, which can be useful when you're off-roading to see what you're about to roll over. And that under-car off-road camera has a little squirter. You tap this and it squirts the camera to clean it off, because of course this camera is getting dirty all the time, but you can clean it without actually getting under the truck, which is very cool. Next up, another interesting quirk of this screen, the auxiliary switches are in here. Most pickups come with auxiliary switches that aren't connected to anything, but you can use them if you want to connect like a winch or a light bar or whatever. This truck has those switches integrated into the screen, and when you connect stuff, you can name the switch exactly what it controls, and you can even assign a picture to it. You can see some of the pictures are very interesting and quirky and weird, not just like a picture of a winch or a light bar. There's like dinosaurs. There's all sorts of different stuff you can do with these auxiliary switch images. Next up, another cool feature in this screen, there is a mode that allows you to select when the vehicle will notify you when you get to a certain tire pressure. So if you're airing down your tires when you're about to go off-roading, you can select when you want the car to honk its horn, and once you get to that pressure, it'll honk and let you know you're there. That way you don't have to keep measuring your tire pressures, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, there's no built-in tire air compressor compressor in the electric Hummer, which is kind of a shame. I have one in my Land Rover Defender. The Rivian has one, which makes it easy to air up and air down. You don't have that here, but this does help a little, makes it easier to measure when your tires are at your desired pressure. Now, other than those items, the center screen is relatively straightforward, works a lot like other General Motors screens, though it's a little bit larger. You can have one display on your left and then a smaller one on your right with more information, which is pretty cool. I also like the fact that these little icons on the left side of the screen are configurable, so you can select what you want there, almost like a favorites shortcut menu. You can choose whatever you want most to be closest to you. Now, next up, right below the screen, you can see you have a row of physical switches that adjust your climate controls, which is pretty nice. That stuff isn't integrated into the screen. It's all just done with these physical switches, which are easy to use and figure out. One especially cool thing here is the switches can change what they do based on your input. So check this out. I go to adjust the heated seat, I press this, and now the control has expanded to the two switches next to it, and I can turn on the heated or cooled seat here. When I'm done, I've selected what I want. The control can go back to being used for what it was before, which is a neat way to integrate physical switches. You still have physical switches, but you don't need so much space for all of them since they can be dynamic and actually change based on what you're adjusting. Very cool. Now, below these switches, you can see another row of switches in the center for various different items, and below that, you have your climate vents, which are in an H pattern. Once again, I told you there'd be a lot of H's in this vehicle, and again, there's still more to come. But next, let's talk crab walking, which is one of the coolest features that this truck can do. So to access crab walking, you have this little dial in the center I showed you before, adjust your drive mode, but there's also a button in the middle of that that has various functions. If you tap the left part, that turns on or off your four-wheel steering. Now, with your four-wheel steering on, this truck has the same turning circle as a Chevy Sonic, the tiny subcompact Chevrolet. That gives you an idea of just how beneficial four-wheel steering can be in tight spaces. But the cool part of this is the crab walk feature. If you hold down the left part of this button, you got to hold it down, and you can see crab walk kind of like initializes on the center screen. Then when you turn the wheel, the four-wheel steering will turn with the front wheels and allow you to kind of shimmy sideways like a crab, as you can see here. Very bizarre, a little disconcerting when you're sitting in the vehicle, and very, very strange, but kind of a cool quirk that you can show people and might be actually useful on an off-road trail if you need to maneuver around something like a crab, frankly. Now, what you're seeing here is the maximum angle of crab walking. The rear wheels will only adjust up to 10 degrees. They can't go further, so you can't like go side to side, but you can move in this strange direction with this crab walk feature, which is a really interesting and cool new innovation. But anyway, next up, let's move on to the gauge cluster display, which is also a large screen, this one behind the steering wheel. Very useful, very informative, just like the center screen, and you can see kind of some moon graphics in the background, once again tying it in with all the other little moon Easter eggs with this vehicle. Now, this center screen shows a lot of different information, and you can adjust it in several different ways. For instance, there's a sport configuration that displays the power meter very front and center, so you know exactly how much power you're using. There's even an off-road display that shows a lot of different off-roading information you might want to see if you don't want to go over to the center screen to see it. There's also kind of a cleaner display that doesn't show just as much information. Also, one cool thing the gauge cluster screen will show you is your current energy usage. This display here will show you exactly what systems are using exactly how much energy. And that way, if you're trying to maximize your range, you can figure out exactly what you should be turning off or at least conserving in order to do that, since it's showing what's using the most energy. But anyway, let's move on to the rest of the quirks and features in this interior, starting over here on the passenger side of the dashboard with this Edition 1 badge. This is an Edition 1 model. It's sort of the launch edition of this car, and so it has the Edition 1 badge to celebrate. It also has more power than the other models, and it's more expensive. It has more stuff. All of these early versions are going to be the Edition 1, sort of a fully equipped, full power model, which is already sold out. Next up, take a look at the floor mats. A little dirty, but you can see an interesting design on them. That is, once again, the surface of the moon, intended to be a lunar surface on the floor mats, once again tying it back to that moon theme of this being the moonshot vehicle, for General Motors and for Hummer. Now, speaking of Easter eggs in here, you have another one on the windshield. You can see at the bottom left corner a little Hummer from the front kind of moving towards you on the driver's side, which is a cool little quirk. You have another one of these on the center screen. The bottom right, you can see here a little Hummer integrated onto the screen where you might not notice it, but a cool little Easter egg if you do. And next up, I want to talk some quirky controls in here, like for instance this paddle on the left side of the steering wheel, and only the left side, that controls your regenerative braking, and you can use that paddle to dial up or down the amount of regen you're using when you're slowing down. Also, another interesting control up front, the rear window rolls down. And I'm not talking about just the rear windows and the doors. I mean, if you press this button here next to the rear view mirror, the rear window will roll down behind the seats, which is a really cool feature. It just disappears, allowing for a nice breeze in this interior, very open air feel, especially if you have the roof panels off. Next up, another interesting control in here is the shifter, which frankly is kind of odd, although its operation is pretty simple. There's a little button over on the left, and you push that and then you shift it down to go into drive or up to go into reverse. And if you want to go into park, you just press the P button on the top of the shifter and then you're in park. Fairly straightforward, even though it looks a little strange. Now, in the vicinity of the shifter, let's go back to that button inside the drive mode dial. You can see top or bottom on this button is an image of the truck with an arrow pointing up or down. That raises or lowers the suspension. This truck has air suspension, and it can go all the way up for more ground clearance or all the way down for easier entry and exit. General Motors tells me the top raised suspension mode will have around 16 inches of ground clearance, which is a huge figure, better than Jeep Wrangler, Ford Bronco, should be able to go over a lot of stuff. Now, the most interesting part of this button is to the right. You can see a little H inside like a triangle. If you press that, nothing happens, except a display comes on the gauge cluster that tells you to send tips and feedback to Hummer at this email address. I asked about this and they said, yeah, that's what that's for. If people have ideas, stuff they want to see, press that button, get that email address, send a note, and General Motors will send over-the-air updates to this vehicle, maybe incorporating some customer feedback with some new ideas, which is kind of a cool thing. A feedback button integrated into a vehicle. When have you ever seen that before? And finally, two other very cool buttons in this interior, both to the left of the steering wheel. One, this button rolls down all the windows at once. You press that and they all go down, which is very, very cool. I wish all cars had this feature, an all window down button, but this one does. Interestingly, haven't seen that feature since the Hummer H2 had it years ago. I'm thrilled they revived it for this Hummer. Also over here, this button, you press it and it opens up the front trunk. Yes, the front trunk. So let's talk about the front trunk. You can open it by pressing that button I just showed you, or by tapping this button on the key fob. That will open the trunk. Or there's a little popper down here under the front bumper. You just press it, and then the front trunk opens itself up automatically and electronically, and you can see there is a cargo storage area in here. Now, this storage area, as you can see, pretty large, and it doesn't have a big front lip, meaning you don't have to lift stuff really high to get it in here. You just kind of lift it over the bumper, just like you would do in back, and then you're in, and you have locking storage, which is a big deal for a pickup truck. Always been kind of a problem having only an exposed bed. You can't put anything in there, it might get stolen or damaged. Well, now you have a locking, usable storage compartment in this truck. Now, not too much interesting up here, as you might expect, although you do have a little yellow button you can press in order to open this in case you get stuck inside the truck. Someone's trying to kidnap you in their Hummer. You tap that and the front trunk will open. But otherwise, it's just a fairly straightforward storage compartment. Now, closing it several different ways. You can tap any of the buttons I mentioned before, including this little popper button on the front bumper. You press that, and then the front trunk automatically closes itself, and the cargo area is hidden and locked. A very cool feature from the electric Hummer. And next up, since I'm up front, let's talk about the other cool stuff in the front of this truck, starting with the light bar, which is especially cool. You can see it here. The middle part is illuminated and says Hummer, and at the very end, the R also says EV, to remind you it's not a standard gas-powered Hummer. You also have the little lights at the end, which are H's, as you can see, and when you put on the turn signal, the little H running light goes away, and the turn signal goes on and sweeps across with these vertical bars, and that is a very very cool effect, looks very neat, and it'll certainly be a distinctive look to the Hummer EV. And it's worth noting these turn signals aren't just turn signals. When you're charging the truck, the bars and these turn signal lights will turn blue, and they increase as your charge increases. So it actually gives you a visual image of how charged your truck is based on how many blue bars there are in your headlights, which is very, very cool. Now, here's another interesting quirk about the lighting in this truck. The headlights are not up here at the grille where you have the Hummer light bar. Instead, the headlights are down here. This space looks like fog lights, but actually this is your truck's headlights, and it's also your truck's high beams. You can see I'm switching between the two, and that's where your lights and high beams are, in this spot in the bumper that looks like fog lights. In fact, the headlights are always on. They serve as your running lights too. So really, this whole front grille is just for style and for the turn signals. It's kind of a distinctive, cool look, but all the real lighting is done in this tiny area in the bumper that looks like your fog lights. Definitely an interesting quirk in the front of the electric Hummer. Now, other notable items up here. For one, massive tow hooks up here, recovery hooks. Absolutely huge to be able to pull this vehicle out of any situation you might encounter. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this is an Edition 1 model, which means it comes with all of the cool off-road goodies. That includes these massive tow hooks, and it also includes a skid plate that runs entirely underneath the vehicle. There's no area that isn't protected by this skid plate, so you don't really have to worry about damaging stuff when you're taking this truck off-road. With the Edition 1 and the off-road features, you also get upgraded tires for added capability, and you get these rock sliders slash side steps going down the side of the truck, which can help protect the truck if you're in an especially rocky situation from getting damaged. Finally, one other notable item up front, you will notice a GMC logo. Very small, very tucked away and hidden, even though this is technically a GMC. That's the brand, although really Hummer is the brand, and General Motors is aware of that. The GMC logo only plays a very small role, and you can only see it up here. And actually, there's one more GMC logo on this truck, and that would be in the back. Once again, you can see it kind of pushed to the side in the tailgate, and very small, the GMC logo with Hummer in the center of the tailgate. Absolutely huge. Even though this is technically a GMC, Hummer is really the brand here, the one that everybody identifies with, and so the GMC logos are very tiny. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this truck is a success if General Motors spins off Hummer entirely into its own new brand, but for now, it is technically branded as a GMC, although you can barely see that on the outside. But this truck being a GMC does give it one very cool benefit, and that would be the multi-pro tailgate, which is used in GMC models, and it is very useful. You can see you can drop the tailgate just like normal, like any pickup truck, nothing unusual there, but you can also separately drop this little center section and then use it as a step to climb into the bed, which is a really neat idea. And you also have this little railing that you can pop out and grab onto to help you get access to the bed even more easy. And the functions of this tailgate don't stop there. You can also put it back to its regular tailgate down configuration and just pop up this little panel at the end, which effectively acts as a bed extender and gives you more space if you want to put stuff in your bed. And you can even put the tailgate up and then just put this centerpiece down, which could allow you to more easily stick longer items into the bed, kind of have them hanging out over this centerpiece, and because they're in here, they won't flop around as much or risk flying out of the bed as they might if the bed was down. It's a very, very neat tailgate design, and it makes sense they put it on the flagship pickup truck in the lineup. But anyway, next up, moving on from the tailgate, let's talk bed. You can see here, fairly standard, fairly straightforward bed, not too much going on in here, although you do have a big H right in the center, as you might expect. Next to the H, you also have a couple of panels that look removable. Those are access panels that can give you access to the shocks in case you need to get at them for whatever reason. Also mounted in this bed, you can see under this cover, you have a power outlet back here, which obviously could be useful for a multitude of items. You can use your truck to power accessories when you're out in the woods, camping, whatever you might be doing. Also, another item worth noting with this bed, General Motors tells me a power tonneau cover is coming. So right now the bed is open, but there will be an accessory tonneau cover. You push a button and it power opens and closes, which can be pretty useful. Also back here, a few other items worth noting. One, the taillights once again have an H shape to them. This time it's sort of twisted 90 degrees, almost vertical, but it is still unmistakably a Hummer H. You also, just like in front, have massive tow hooks back here. Very useful and necessary if you go off-roading to get this truck unstuck, or more likely to get someone else free by using this truck. And next up, another exterior item worth noting since I'm around back. Right here you have what looks like a fuel door, but actually it's your charge port door. You press it just like a fuel door, it pops open, and you can see your charge port access back here where you can plug in your truck just like other electric vehicles. Now, since I am on the outside, I also want to talk through styling with this truck, and I have to say I really like how it looks. It has a muscly, brawny look to it, and it has some cues from previous Hummer models, although modernized, of course, for today's world. I wouldn't call this truck beautiful, but brawny, muscular, purposeful are the terms I would use to describe it, and it certainly does look like a Hummer, and a very capable vehicle with layered wheel arches and a tall belt line, small narrow windows that projects this image of can do anything, which frankly is because it mostly can. And finally, we move on to the back seat of the Hummer EV, which is actually the least interesting part of this entire truck, although it's still worth noting and discussing. For one thing, size, it's pretty big back here. Not quite as large as a huge, heavy-duty, full-size crew cab truck, but I got knee room, I got headroom, I got leg room. There's good space back here. And you have some good amenities. For instance, rear seat climate control. You have your own zone back here, which is uncommon in pickup trucks. You also have heated seats back here, which is a nice touch. You can see these buttons, just tap and turn on your rear heated seats, which is nice to have. And you have a lot of charge ports in back. You can see USB-C and USB-A right next to each other, but there's also a household style power outlet down here under this cover, which is particularly useful. It's nice to have one household charger in the interior of the vehicle to charge whatever you need while you're driving along that doesn't plug into USB. Good to see that here. You can also see a lot of moon references back here. Once again, the floor mats have the moon surface printed into them. The speaker covers back here also have the moon surface printed in, and even this little storage cubby has the moon on the bottom instead of just a regular rubber piece, which is kind of a cool little quirk. Also worth noting, the back seat, the center part of the two side rear seats opens. You can pull it open here, and there's a little storage cubby behind it for some hidden storage if you want to put small items where someone is unlikely to discover them. Also, the seat base can fold up. As you can see, you fold it up here, and then you have a flat surface on the bottom where you can stick larger items if for some reason you need a flat surface in the truck to stick larger items. You have that here. And so those are the quirks and features of the new GMC Hummer EV pickup. Now it's time to get behind the wheel and see how it drives. All right, driving the Hummer EV. And I'm wearing a mask because I have someone from GM with me so I don't destroy this valuable prototype vehicle. But I'm very excited to drive this car. I've been excited for a long time, ever since I reviewed the original non-moving prototype, and I was assailed by Tesla people on Twitter who insisted this would not come to market anytime soon. Well, here it is. So when you get behind the wheel, the first thing you notice in here, the interior is very different from any other General Motors vehicle. I drove a Chevy Blazer to come here. The difference is substantial. Everything, it feels like kind of like a clean sheet, totally rethought out. Any impressions you have of General Motors vehicles having low quality or old tech or whatever, people still think that way. It ain't true here. This feels like one of the most modern vehicles I've been in. You get big screens that have kind of cool new graphics on them. Everything looks really, really neat when you're sitting in here. And you also have a very high seating position. You feel like kind of the king of the road, which was a hallmark of the old Hummer models. It's something people liked about the old Hummer models. And so it makes sense to want to bring that back. You have an upright windshield. You have a very square, like I mentioned earlier, you have a square dashboard. Everything is square, a lot of squares, rectangles in here to kind of give that feeling of muscle. Now, I will say one surprising thing here, this is a relatively smooth ride. Not even just relatively. I'm on a dirt road, some ruts here and there, rocks and such, and it feels very smooth, which is nice. You know, the goal of this vehicle, General Motors has made clear, is not just to create a great electric vehicle or a fast car or whatever, but they also want it to be luxurious and comfortable, which it needs to be at this price point. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with the way that it feels on the road. It's definitely more luxurious and more comfortable than the H2, which was the last Hummer I drove prior to this. Ultimately, it just feels like a modern and recent vehicle. It feels nice and it feels luxurious, and it's good. Now, you get great interior room in here. This is going to be a big thing. Generally speaking, big, tall people like to drive big, tall trucks, and they're going to feel right at home in here, just like they do in Tahoe and things like that. Got a lot of headroom, even for me, a lot of legroom, knee room. There's a lot of space in this interior. One of the things that I'm kind of surprised by with this vehicle is relative ease of driving it. Full-size pickup trucks, heavy-duty pickup trucks, which is a good comparison point to this, even those vehicles feel very lumbering. This feels, I don't want to say more athletic than that, although it certainly is. It's obviously a lot faster, and it feels a lot more, you know, engaging and exciting than those cars just to begin with, but it also just doesn't have sort of that floaty body roll feel. The steering in this feels a little bit more connected and precise, and also you have a lot of weight down low. Having the weight pretty low in electric vehicles is always a really, really, really big benefit in terms of their driving experience and the way it really feels on the road. It helps to minimize some of the massiveness of these vehicles. Having the weight so low, it doesn't, when you're turning and stuff, it doesn't really feel quite as large and heavy as it is. All right, I'm gonna try a little bit of acceleration. This is one of the big things about this vehicle. Wow, it feels really, really, really quick. No surprise, of course. You step on it and it really, really starts to go, even on this, which is a loose surface. And that's cool. You know, that's what you kind of want to do when you're off-roading. That's what all the Raptor guys do, right? They go out and they floor it in the desert and the truck looks cool. And that kind of feels like that, except it's even faster. And it's even more engaging and more exciting when you do it. Yeah, wow, it really takes off. Now, you can obviously, it is really quick, and honestly, it stops pretty well. This is a very heavy vehicle. General Motors hasn't yet announced the curb weight of this, but you just have to assume in order to get a vehicle this size to go this fast, there's a massively heavy battery here. And so it probably weighs, it's multiple tons. To get it going this fast is pretty good. I'm also really impressed with the steering in this. I'm not driving it in any crazy racetrack type situation, but just kind of cruising around. It feels a lot less, it definitely feels a lot less floaty than other big trucks and frankly other big SUVs. One thing I am surprised about, especially in this vehicle, is the ride quality. This definitely rides better than Rivian. It definitely feels more comfortable in that. There's no question about that. It has a more luxury car feel to it. Really, really impressively so. I would venture to say this is probably the best riding pickup truck that I've ever spent any time in. Truthfully, I think the thing I'm probably most impressed with about this vehicle, in addition to kind of the cool Easter eggs and all the abilities and capabilities that it has, that stuff was all kind of taken for granted though. When General Motors is going to come out with a Hummer, we knew it was going to be an off-roader, we knew it was going to be fast, et cetera, et cetera. I think the thing I'm most surprised about here is it's actually nice. Like, this is quite a nice vehicle. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different electric cars, and I would definitely put this in the top few. Mercedes-Benz EQS probably being the nicest, and this is up there with some of the other really nice ones. It's definitely a nicer interior than the Rivian. It drives a little bit quieter, more luxurious, better ride quality. And so that's the GMC Hummer EV pickup truck, the latest model in the fiercely competitive electric pickup truck segment. This has a lot of promise. Tough, cool looks, great technology, amazing performance, and I'm really excited for it to go on sale, especially the more affordable versions. But for now, it's time to give the Hummer EV a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 73 out of 100, which ties the Rivian R1T for the best score I've ever given a pickup truck. Now, my opinion here is going to be controversial, so strap in. The Hummer EV has definitely gotten less love than the other electric trucks. People love Rivian and Tesla because they're upstart underdog brands, and they love the F-150 Lightning because it's more rational and far more affordable. But I'm one of the only people who's been around all of these trucks, except for the Tesla, which doesn't exist, and personally, I like the Hummer EV the best. I love the interior, I love the removable roof, I love the capabilities, and the ride quality and driving experience is phenomenal, certainly better than Rivian. The styling of the Hummer EV is way too macho for my tastes, and some items like the towing capacity are a bit of a drawback, but if I were buying an electric truck, the Hummer EV is the one I'd get. Then again, it had better be because it's also the most expensive, and so from that perspective, the Rivian is probably the better all-around choice because it offers many of the same benefits for a lot less money. But people keep asking me which is my favorite electric truck, and it's this one. The Hummer EV is the best, though its many benefits come at a substantial cost.